Today, we're digging into one of the most incredible economic turnarounds of the last half-century. It's the story of how Vietnam went from being a country defined by war to a global manufacturing powerhouse.
Okay, let's just jump right in with a question for you. If you had to bet on which country is going to see the fastest wealth growth on the entire planet over the next 10 years, who would you pick?
The answer, and this might come as a surprise, is Vietnam. Yeah, while a lot of the world has been looking elsewhere, Vietnam's been quietly and strategically setting itself up to become the next huge global manufacturing hub. You know, for so many of us in the West, the word Vietnam still brings up these old images from movies: war, jungles, real hardship. But that's a picture from decades ago. The reality today? It's a country of buzzing cities with skyscrapers, high-tech hubs, and just this incredible energy of a nation that is absolutely on the rise. Think about it. In just one generation, Vietnam has catapulted itself from being one of the poorest countries on Earth to a booming middle-income economy. So how on earth did they do it? How did a nation so scarred by a century of conflict pull off such an amazing turnaround?
Well, to really get how they rose so high, you first have to understand the incredible hardship that came before. There's this great Vietnamese saying, "In hardship, wisdom emerges." And man, it just perfectly captures the story.
For nearly 100 years, Vietnam was under French colonial rule, its resources just stripped away. This, of course, led to a fierce, long fight for independence, and French rule finally ended in 1954. But peace? It didn't last. The country was split in two, setting the stage for the Vietnam War, a brutal conflict that lasted for 2 whole decades. By the time the country was finally reunited in 1975, it was just completely shattered.
And the scale of that devastation is it's hard to even wrap your head around. The human cost was unbelievable, up to 3 million Vietnamese lives lost. The land itself was scarred by 4.6 million tons of bombs. The economy was a wreck, and millions of people were forced to flee their homes.
So what was the result of all this? Total economic despair. I mean, in the late 1980s, the average income in Vietnam was somewhere between $150 and $300 a year. To put that in perspective, that would make it the second poorest country in the world today. The government knew something radical had to change, and had to change fast. And that change came in 1986. It was a revolutionary new policy, one that would completely alter the course of the nation's history. It was called Doi Moi, which basically means renovation. And this, right here, was the single most important spark for Vietnam's economic miracle. The idea was to move away from this super rigid, state-controlled system to what they called a socialist-oriented market economy. Now, the steps they took were pretty cautious at first, but the effect was massive. They gave farmers more control, which totally revitalized agriculture. They got rid of price controls, which let actual markets start to work. And this is the big one. A new law in 1987 basically threw open the doors for foreign companies to come in, invest, and make a profit. So Doi Moi laid all this crucial groundwork, but the real potential was still being held back by a U.S. trade embargo that had been in place since the war. When that embargo was finally lifted in 1994, well, the floodgates opened. Big global companies like Nike and Adidas saw the potential right away and were some of the first ones in, setting up shop almost immediately. Okay, so how did Vietnam build on that momentum? Well, analysts point to 3 key pillars that really fired up its incredible growth engine. It's almost like a playbook for any developing country. First up, Vietnam got really strategic and honestly aggressive about opening its markets to the world. They joined major trade groups like ASEAN. They normalized trade with the US. They joined the World Trade Organization. And then they went on a tear, signing a whole bunch of free trade deals with all the global economic heavyweights. Pillar 2 was all about making smart changes at home. And this chart, wow, it really shows you how well it worked. They started slashing red tape, making it way easier for foreign companies to invest. And the result, a tidal wave of money poured in. Just look at these numbers, from over $27 billion in 2022 to over $36 billion in 2023. That is a 32% jump in a single year. That's not just growth, that's a rocket ship. And the third pillar, this might have been the most important one of all. Vietnam knew that its greatest asset was its people. You've got half the population under the age of 35. So the government poured money into public education and into infrastructure, building the foundation for a skilled, modern workforce. And that investment paid off big time. It fueled this huge shift in the economy. It used to be all about agriculture, right? Not anymore. Today, industry and manufacturing make up the biggest slice of the pie. And get this, Vietnam is now the seventh largest exporter of electronics in the world. A huge reason for this shift is that all the big tech companies are flocking to Vietnam. We're talking Samsung, Apple, Intel, they are all making massive investments. So why the rush? Well, companies are looking for stability, especially with all the US-China trade tensions. And Vietnam is offering this really business-friendly environment, tax breaks, and a young, eager workforce. It's a winning combo.
Now, this crazy fast growth has had a huge impact on the lives of everyday people, lifting millions and millions out of poverty. But, the story isn't perfect. There are still some pretty big challenges ahead.
But first, let's talk about the progress, because it's staggering. This number, 40 million, that's how many people were lifted out of poverty in just over 20 years. In that time, the national poverty rate just plummeted from almost 60% all the way down to 14%. That's an incredible achievement, but to keep that momentum going, Vietnam has to make a really tough leap. You see, there's a huge difference between being a place that makes things and being a place that creates things, an innovation hub. And this is where the story of VinFast, Vietnam's very first major car company, gets so interesting. So when VinFast launched its first electric SUV in the United States, the reviews were, well, they were brutal. The super popular car channel Donut Media called it the worst reviewed car in America. They said it was rushed and just didn't work right. Ouch.
But here's the fascinating part. Instead of getting defensive, VinFast actually listened to the criticism, went back to the drawing board, and tried to fix the problems. And then they invited the same critics back to try the new version. Now, the car still wasn't amazing, but that willingness to listen, to admit you messed up, and to try and get better so quickly, that's super rare. It shows they have a real ambition to compete on the world stage. And that really shines a light on the road ahead. The economic growth is undeniable, for sure. But a big chunk of the population is still struggling, especially out in the rural areas. Corruption is still a serious problem, and the country still has to make that incredibly difficult jump from just assembling products for foreign companies to actually designing and innovating their own.
So what's the big takeaway here? Vietnam's rise from the ashes of war is genuinely one of the most inspiring economic stories of our time. It's a huge testament to resilience and just really smart policy. The journey so far has been nothing short of remarkable, but its next chapter, becoming a real innovation leader while making sure that prosperity is shared by all its people, that's the chapter the whole world is watching now.